In a quiet workshop tucked away in the heart of Africa, a small humming device sat on a worn workbench. To the untrained eye, it looked like just another prototype, metal coils, wires, and small spinning components, but in reality, it was the culmination of years of relentless experimentation. Maxwell Chikumbutso had created something that could change the way an entire continent thinks about energy. For decades, Africa has faced the same challenge: inconsistent electricity, fragile grids, and expensive fuel imports. Rural communities remain off-grid, while cities struggle with rolling blackouts. Governments invest billions, yet millions still go without reliable power. But this small device promises a radical shift. It isn't solar. It isn't wind. It isn't yet another battery system. Maxwell's generator is self-sustaining, compact, and capable of producing continuous power with minimal external input. Its principles are deceptively simple, yet the engineering behind it is revolutionary. Imagine communities that never have to worry about power shortages, factories that operate independently of erratic grids, and entire towns where energy is no longer a luxury, but a guaranteed resource. The first test was unremarkable to most observers. A single unit powered a few lights, a small refrigerator, and a water pump in a rural homestead. But to Maxwell, it was proof of concept. From that modest beginning, he scaled the technology to power workshops, clinics, and schools. The device ran silently, efficiently, and without conventional fuel. Observers who visited the site noticed something unusual: no smell, no noise, no smoke, only steady, reliable energy flowing from a single small machine. Word of the generator began to spread. Engineers, scientists, and government officials traveled from neighboring countries to see it firsthand. Some were skeptical, dismissing it as a novelty or an unsustainable prototype. Others, however, saw what Maxwell saw: the potential to solve a problem that decades of policy, foreign aid, and investment had failed to fix. With interest mounting, a challenge emerged. Could this technology scale? Could it power a factory, a hospital, or even an entire village? To prove it, Maxwell partnered with local manufacturers to produce larger units, testing them under harsh conditions. They ran continuously through storms, heat waves, and power surges, demonstrating resilience that traditional generators could only dream of. Soon, the narrative shifted from curiosity to urgency. Entrepreneurs saw opportunities to reduce operational costs, municipalities explored replacing diesel-based grids, and rural communities imagined a life without electricity scarcity. The impact was visible. Small businesses began running beyond daylight hours, schools could keep lights on for evening classes, and medical clinics maintained essential equipment without interruption. The generator also ignited conversations on energy independence. Africa has long relied on imported technologies to sustain its infrastructure. Maxwell's invention challenged that paradigm. It suggested that innovation born on the continent, tailored to its realities, could outperform systems developed elsewhere for completely different environments. Global attention followed. Tech journalists and industry analysts began visiting, documenting the progress. Some multinational energy corporations dismissed it at first. Others quietly tested the system, realizing that while it wasn't designed for Western grids, its efficiency in unpredictable conditions was unmatched. Maxwell's work highlighted a fundamental truth: energy solutions built for local needs by local minds could not only serve Africa but redefine what was possible worldwide. Meanwhile, the generator sparked a new wave of creativity. Engineers began experimenting with modular designs, hybridizing it with solar panels, water turbines, and small-scale wind systems to enhance output. Students and young inventors started building their own scaled-down models, inspired by what they saw. One prototype powered a classroom entirely off the grid, while another kept a community water pump running through an entire dry season. Yet despite growing interest, Maxwell faced significant challenges. Regulatory approvals, intellectual property disputes, and resource constraints threatened to slow adoption. International investors approached with contracts promising funding in exchange for control. Maxwell was faced with a difficult decision: prioritize commercialization and profit, or ensure that the technology remained accessible to those who needed it most. In the middle of this tension, something remarkable happened. A local village demonstrated a use case that no investor, no regulator, and no industrial expert had fully anticipated. Using just one generator, they not only powered essential infrastructure, but also created a small business ecosystem. Refrigerated storage allowed farmers to sell perishable goods farther afield. Shops extended hours. Children could study at night. And the community, once isolated by energy scarcity, became a hub of activity and innovation. Maxwell realized then that the true potential of his device wasn't measured in watts, kilowatts, or patents. It was measured in the lives it changed, the independence it fostered, and the new possibilities it unlocked. What began as a humble generator in a small workshop was rapidly becoming a blueprint for a new energy paradigm, one where Africa no longer waited for solutions from abroad but built its own, tailored to its unique challenges. Conchu, from where you stop, don't end the script. International attention escalated faster than anyone could have anticipated. News outlets from Europe, North America, and Asia began covering Maxwell's generator, not as a small local curiosity, but as a potential game-changer for global energy markets. Analysts debated whether it could disrupt multi-billion-dollar utility companies, while energy investors started quietly calling his workshop for demonstrations. Emails flooded in, some with offers of partnerships, others with veiled warnings about intellectual property and competitive retaliation. Despite the pressure, Maxwell remained focused on practicality. He knew that the success of the generator wasn't about headlines or stock prices. It was about impact. Rural schools needed electricity to operate after sunset. Clinics couldn't afford intermittent power for life-saving equipment. Communities had long waited for an energy solution designed specifically for Africa's realities, not imported systems meant for far more stable environments. To demonstrate its scalability, Maxwell and his team installed a series of generators in a small regional town, integrating them with existing infrastructure. The results were astonishing. Streetlights stayed on through heavy storms, refrigerators kept medicine cool without interruption, and water pumps continued to operate through days of blackouts that would normally cripple the town. Locals celebrated quietly at first, and then word spread like wildfire. Reliable electricity was finally attainable. The demonstration caught the eye of NGOs, municipal governments, and even continental policymakers. They began discussing a cooperative deployment program to distribute generators to the most energy-deprived regions. But with interest came scrutiny. Regulatory bodies demanded safety certifications, emissions tests, and production audits. Competitors, threatened by the innovation, began lobbying against rapid approval, arguing that the technology hadn't been tested for large-scale deployment. In response, Maxwell invited engineers and scientists to the original workshop. He gave them unrestricted access to test the generator, documenting every detail from material composition to energy output, all while emphasizing practical performance over theoretical design. The transparency paid off. Independent tests confirmed the generator's reliability, efficiency, and adaptability. Meanwhile, young innovators began building on his work. University students modified the generator for microgrid applications, while local technicians experimented with hybrid systems combining solar, wind, and Maxwell's device. Communities that had once relied on unstable grid connections were now experimenting with entirely off-grid solutions, proving that innovation could scale organically when the right technology met real-world needs. But global corporations were not idle. Some tried to undercut Maxwell by creating high-cost alternatives, while others attempted to purchase his technology outright. Offers ranged from tens of millions in exchange for exclusive rights to conditional manufacturing contracts that would limit local production. Maxwell faced a difficult choice: profit and control, or empowerment and accessibility. He chose the latter. Keeping production and distribution in African hands became a priority. Local workshops began assembling units from standardized components, creating jobs, fostering skill development, and ensuring that communities could maintain and repair the generators themselves. For Maxwell, this was more than a device. It was the seed of an energy movement. As momentum grew, The international community began to take notice in a way that went beyond curiosity. Delegations from other continents arrived, not just to study the technology, but to understand the ecosystem Maxwell had created. Small-scale manufacturing, localized distribution, education, and community empowerment, all tied together by a device that defied conventional thinking. The question now was no longer whether Maxwell's generator worked. It was how far its influence could reach, and whether it could inspire a continent-wide revolution in energy independence. The breakthrough came quietly, almost by accident. One of Maxwell's technicians, experimenting with scaling the device for a rural hospital, noticed an unusual pattern. The generator was producing small bursts of energy beyond its rated capacity when paired with a particular arrangement of coils and capacitors. It wasn't just a fluctuation, it was a replicable amplification effect that could significantly increase output without additional fuel or external energy. Maxwell and his team immediately ran controlled tests. Within days, the prototype demonstrated continuous energy output capable of powering entire small towns, agricultural operations, and industrial workshops, all with minimal maintenance. What had started as a simple generator now had the potential to rival traditional mini-grids, and the implications were staggering. Word of the amplified generator spread almost instantly. Scientists, engineers, and energy policymakers descended on the workshop to witness the phenomenon. Some were skeptical, insisting it violated established energy principles. Others, after running independent tests, were forced to acknowledge that it worked and that it could be a new paradigm in energy generation, particularly for off-grid and underdeveloped regions. With this revelation, international interest escalated to unprecedented levels. African governments began discussing large-scale implementation, while energy companies in Asia and Europe scrambled to understand the technology, fearing it could disrupt decades of market dominance. Maxwell was now in the spotlight, not as a local inventor, but as the architect of a potential continental energy revolution. Yet, even with growing acclaim, challenges multiplied. Scaling production for amplified units required new materials, stricter safety protocols, and advanced manufacturing processes that exceeded what the small workshops could initially handle. Supply chains needed coordination across multiple countries, and maintaining quality standards became critical. Despite these hurdles, Maxwell insisted on keeping the operation local. Partnerships were formed with regional manufacturers, universities provided research support, and communities became part of the production and maintenance process. The system was no longer just a device, it was a network, a movement, a proof that homegrown innovation could thrive under African conditions without dependence on foreign infrastructure. Meanwhile, the global energy debate had shifted. Conferences, think tanks, and academic journals began framing Maxwell's generator not as an anomaly, but as a case study in distributed, resilient, and sustainable energy systems. Analysts speculated, if replicated across the continent, it could dramatically reduce reliance on fossil fuels, lower electricity costs, and even influence climate policy. The social impact was immediate. Villages once isolated by poor infrastructure suddenly had reliable lighting, refrigeration, and water pumping. Schools could hold evening classes. Clinics ran uninterrupted operations, saving lives. Farmers extended work hours and increased productivity. And through all of this, the generator became a symbol, not just of technological innovation, but of self-reliance, ingenuity, and African ingenuity solving African problems. Just as the generator began reshaping local economies and infrastructure, a completely unexpected development arrived. A multinational tech conglomerate expressed interest in integrating Maxwell's amplified generator into urban smart grids. This posed the ultimate dilemma, allowing the technology to scale globally, but risking loss of local control and independence, or keeping it decentralized and community-driven, potentially limiting its immediate reach. Maxwell spent nights weighing the options, staring at the softly glowing prototype in his workshop. On one hand, partnering with the multinational conglomerate could provide the resources to manufacture amplified generators at a scale he had only dreamed of, enough to power entire cities and even export energy solutions globally. On the other hand, such a partnership risked turning his invention into another corporate product, stripped of its African identity. inaccessible to the communities it was meant to serve. He decided on a third path, one that few would dare attempt. Instead of selling or licensing the technology to one powerful entity, he would create a distributed production model. Local workshops across several African countries would be equipped with standardized kits, training programs, and quality control guidelines. Each unit would be built locally, maintained locally, and deployed to the communities that needed it most. The technology would scale, without losing its roots. The first pilot program rolled out in a small West African region. Villages that previously had only a few hours of electricity per day now enjoyed continuous power, allowing small businesses to operate late into the evening, children to study after sunset, and hospitals to maintain life-saving equipment without interruption. Farmers stored produce in refrigerated containers, drastically reducing spoilage. Local mechanics were trained to repair and maintain the devices, creating employment and skills development simultaneously. As the pilot succeeded, news spread across the continent. Governments began sending delegations to study Maxwell's system firsthand. Engineers from Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, and Morocco came to the original workshop, exchanging ideas, learning the modular design, and adapting it for their own regional needs. It wasn't just a generator anymore. It had become a framework for energy independence. International media caught on quickly. Headlines proclaimed Africa as the new frontier for renewable and self-sustaining energy innovation. Analysts speculated that if the distributed model proved successful across multiple regions, it could shift the global energy balance, reducing dependency on fossil fuels and foreign technology. Meanwhile, Maxwell and his team continued to innovate. They refined the amplified generator, making it lighter, more efficient, and easier to assemble. Hybrid versions integrated solar and micro-hydro capabilities, allowing communities near rivers to harness multiple renewable sources seamlessly. The system became a blueprint for resilient, off-grid energy infrastructure. But with growing attention came growing scrutiny. Multinational corporations that had initially approached Maxwell for exclusive rights now challenged the intellectual property, attempting to file patents on derivative versions of the technology. Regulatory agencies in some countries questioned the safety and certification of self-built units. Maxwell faced the daunting task of protecting his invention while ensuring it remained accessible to the people who needed it most. In response, he turned to transparency as his strongest weapon. All designs, schematics, and test results were shared openly with verified engineers and local authorities. Workshops across the continent were certified under a common standard. Maxwell became not just an inventor, but a leader of a continental movement, proving that open-source innovation could rival, and even surpass, the monopoly of multinational corporations. Communities began to tell their own stories. Clinics powered by Maxwell's generators saved lives. Schools stayed open after sunset. Markets extended operating hours. Villagers celebrated not just electricity, but independence, opportunity, and hope. The generator had transcended its role as a device. It had become a catalyst for social transformation. Even as global powers watched closely, Maxwell remained grounded. For him, the generator was never about fame or fortune. It was about solving real problems, in real places for real people. And yet, the larger question loomed. Could Africa's innovation truly reshape global energy markets? Or would entrenched interests attempt to suppress a movement that threatened the status quo? As discussions began at the Continental Summit on Energy Independence, Maxwell prepared to unveil the next phase, a networked system connecting multiple generators to form self-sustaining mini-grids capable of powering entire districts without relying on traditional infrastructure, a vision that could redefine energy access for generations to come. The summit was unlike anything Maxwell had experienced before. Delegates from over a dozen countries filled the hall: energy ministers, policy advisors, engineers, and international observers. Screens displayed maps of rural regions, highlighting areas with limited or no electricity, alongside data projections showing how a network of Maxwell's generators could sustainably power thousands of homes, schools, and clinics. Maxwell stepped forward, his prototype in hand. He didn't need flashy graphics or elaborate presentations. The device itself told the story. He explained how modular units could connect in clusters, how amplified energy output could scale without additional fuel, and how local workshops could produce, maintain, and repair the systems. The simplicity and practicality of the plan left the audience in awe. Questions came fast. Could the generators handle extreme weather? How would maintenance be managed in remote areas? What about safety certifications and intellectual property? Maxwell answered each calmly, demonstrating real-world test data, durability reports, and community testimonials. The delegates nodded. It was clear Africa was not only capable of solving its own energy challenges, but it was doing so in a way that could inspire the world. As discussions progressed, one of the larger energy conglomerates tried to challenge Maxwell publicly, questioning whether his system could truly be reliable at scale. Maxwell invited the company representatives to observe a live network of connected generators powering an entire district. When they witnessed the lights staying on, clinics running uninterrupted, and water pumps operating seamlessly, even the skeptics were forced to acknowledge the system's effectiveness. News of the demonstration spread quickly. International media reported on the African mini-grid system powered by Maxwell's generators, emphasizing the combination of ingenuity, sustainability, and local empowerment. Analysts predicted that if scaled continent-wide, the system could reduce dependence on fossil fuels, lower energy costs, and provide a template for emerging markets globally. Meanwhile, Maxwell returned to his workshop, overseeing the next wave of innovation. Teams were experimenting with integrating micro-hydro setups in riverine communities, solar panels for sunny regions, and wind-assisted amplification systems for high-altitude villages. Each adaptation made the generator more versatile, more resilient, and more suitable for diverse African landscapes. Communities responded with enthusiasm. Farmers extended their work hours, reducing spoilage and increasing income. Students studied after sunset. Clinics no longer feared blackouts during critical procedures. Even small businesses, once constrained by intermittent electricity, expanded operations. Maxwell realized that the generator was a catalyst for economic and social transformation. Yet, as the impact grew, so did the stakes. Global corporations began lobbying governments to introduce stricter regulations and intellectual property claims. Some attempted to discredit the technology, arguing that amplified generators violated energy standards. Maxwell knew that the movement's survival depended not just on technical success, but on governance, transparency, and community involvement. He implemented a continental oversight network, connecting workshops, universities, and local authorities to monitor production, maintenance, and deployment. This decentralized system ensured that no single entity could monopolize the technology while maintaining quality and safety standards. As the network expanded, Africa began experiencing a quiet revolution. Entire districts became self-sufficient in energy. Villages once isolated by unreliable grids became hubs of commerce and education. News reports framed Maxwell's invention as a blueprint for sustainable, local, and scalable energy innovation, attracting attention from governments, tech leaders, and investors worldwide. But Maxwell knew the journey was far from over. The generator had unlocked a new reality, but the next challenge was enormous: connecting multiple regions into a continental energy network, ensuring interoperability, security, and resilience, without compromising local control or accessibility. Maxwell paused, looking out over the workshop where his team was already assembling the next generation of generators. What had begun as a simple idea in a small African workshop had grown into a movement, a network of innovation, resilience, and empowerment spreading across communities and nations. The continental energy network he envisioned wasn't just about electricity. It was about independence, opportunity, and a future shaped by African ingenuity. Schools stayed open after sunset. Clinics operated without fear of blackouts. Farmers expanded their productivity, and entire communities gained a sense of self-reliance they had never known. International observers took note. Corporations recalibrated their strategies, and governments began to rethink how energy could be produced and distributed. Maxwell's generator had proven that true innovation doesn't always come from billion-dollar labs. It can emerge from necessity, from persistence, and from a vision that refuses to compromise. As the sun set over the workshop, Maxwell smiled. The hum of the generators filled the air, a sound that symbolized progress, hope, and the power of ingenuity. Africa's energy landscape had been reshaped, not by outsiders or massive corporations, but by a single man who dared to imagine a better way.